Hi, I'm Sharaad Kuttan. Welcome to Let's Talk, the show that tries to bring you some of the most important conversations of the day. Now, the Middle East is often on our screens as a flashpoint, tensions between different communities and over geopolitical interests. To help us get more depth into a region that's actually much more complex and often portrayed, I have with me Professor Dietrich Jung. He's at the Center of Contemporary Middle East Studies at the University of Southern Denmark. Thank you so much, Dietrich, for being with me.
Thank you for the invitation.
Okay, it's a tough one, it's a big subject, but can we start with you, a European, a German, interested in Islamic studies and in particular the region of the Middle East. Tell us, how did you get into it?
There are two reasons behind that. The one is that I was politically socialized in the late 1970s. And for a German in particular, a young German who was politically interested, there were two solidarities competing. Solidarity with the Israeli state, because of the Holocaust and the background of German historical legacy. And on the other hand, there were the Palestinians. And this was very puzzling and raised my interest into the region. And the other thing was, when I came close to 20, I just wanted to leave Europe, and I had not so much money, so the only thing what was to do was crossing the Mediterranean.
Right, and it's interesting that you say it's as simple as crossing the Mediterranean. Europe seems so opposed to the Middle East in terms of its values, at least some would suggest. But in geographical terms, very, very close to each other, and of course historically deeply entwined with each other. Did that history of the relationship between Christian Europe and the Muslim world play a part in your education? Was that apparent in what you were seeing growing up?
Not really, no. I did not see the two regions in terms of a religious opposition or at all in religious terms. That I can do in retrospect and what I have learned. And when you mention that there are two regions and the Mediterranean in between, what I have never learned at school really was that the Ottoman Empire was already a European player as well, not just a Middle Eastern player. And this is something we tend to forget in our historical education. But I did not see that when I became engaged in the region. That is something I know now.
Okay, so what was the route that you took? Is it as a sociologist, as a historian, as a political scientist? What was your choice to enter into the Middle East?
The choice was, I was interested in politics, so I studied political science. And the other thing was, I have been to Egypt, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and I did not speak the language. So I was interested in Arabic, I wanted to study Arabic, and I had to discover that the almost only way at that time in the 1980s was to study Islamic Studies, where Arabic was a tool. It was not the main purpose. So, and in this way I came also to Islam, but it was not at my highest priority on my agenda what I wanted to learn. So it was Arabic plus political science, and the studies became political science and Islamic studies.
Interesting, Islamic studies, we would think of the 50s, 60s and 70s of the Middle East. It's often dominated by secular parties, the Ba'athist Party, of leftist regimes. We have Yemen, to all kinds of other leftist regimes. This shift from the secular Arab, the image of the secular Arab to a kind of a more religious one, was that something that you grappled with? I mean, how did you kind of negotiate that?
Well, when you start to learn Arabic and you understand the language, and then you will also understand that this kind of juxtaposing the secular regimes of the 50s, 60s and Islam today is a bit flawed. Already somebody like Nasser, who is known as an Arab socialist, also used religious terms in his political language. So in this sense, one should be careful to see these two political, as political camps. They are antagonists. But when you look at the political language of the region, there was always a sort of religious terms which have been used because they resonate amongst broader parts of the population.
Right, so if, as a political scientist watching political behavior or political formations and organizations, you still had to understand the religious idioms in which politics was cast. Is that what you're saying?
As long as you really listened. Look, when you are a politician in the Arab world, and later I was also working in Turkey, you speak with two audiences. The one is your home audience, and the other one is the international audience. And you speak two languages. And not just literally two languages, but also in terms of meaning. So a speech in English by an Arab president is different than the speech in Arabic. And in Arabic, it's much more usual that you use language which you can associate to Islam.
Right. So you had to become, as a scholar, more attentive to these nuances, these different registers.
That you naturally, yeah.
What were you looking at when you started? What specific elements of Middle Eastern society, cultural politics were you interested in?
I started out with what also the media like to present, that's wars and conflicts. And I have done also in political science war and conflict studies, so it was almost natural that I was looking at conflicts. I wrote my MA thesis on the civil war in Lebanon, for example, and the focus was on conflict in the region.
Now, you know, when we talk about, especially the Muslim world, today there are equivalents made, false equivalents, people say, between Islam and terrorism and that kind of politics. You said you came out of the 70s, where actually the left was in fact the harbinger of violent extremism. We had the Red Army factions in Germany and many parts of Europe. Were you surprised, I mean, seeing this long arc of the transformation of the image of the Muslim, of Muslim politics, at least from a European standpoint?
I would say the interesting thing is that more global ideas frame also the way we see conflicts. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict never was an East-West conflict in terms of the Cold War, but it has been perceived in that way, and certainly the Soviet Union and the United States were on different camps and have supported different forces. Today, East and West is Islam and the West, because the global framing has changed. Many of the conflicts on the ground, in my opinion, are still the same social conflicts, but the way they are perceived and the way also they are expressed by local forces has changed.
Could that have been anticipated? Did anybody anticipate this shift in framing, as you put it?
This is difficult to answer. I have not a straightforward answer to that. But what I think is wrong, or what I do not like so much, is this complete idea of an Islamic revival. Because if we look at the history of colonialism in the region and the history of states getting independent, then Islam always was a force in this political struggle, right from the 19th century.
Like an anti-imperialist force.
Yes, the first pan-Islamic anti-imperialist ideas are from Jamal ad-Din al-Afghani from the second half of the 19th century, where a pan-Islamic movement should oppose British colonialism. So in this sense, this is not utterly new, that there is an idea of global Islamic Ummah which should go against political suppression. We had that before.
Okay, and in the final minute we have, I mean, were your next steps? I mean, was it a very straight path for you in terms of your subject matter, or did you have serendipitous moments which took you in different directions?
I had to earn money, so very often the decision was made according to what my superiors would like to do in terms of research, so there was no straight path, but there was certainly a continuation in my own way of career, what I have been interested into. And I was following basically somehow a bit the trend, because I was moving more from Middle Eastern conflicts to the modern history of Islam.
Right, okay. We'll take a short break. We'll be back with more. Stay tuned to Let's Talk.